All right, welcome people here and online. Yeah, so good evening everybody. And yeah, maybe before we start, maybe good idea to generate correct motivation, right? Yeah, before we dive into the topic of the reasons to prove selflessness, right? So that's the section we read in the text, and that's in order to eliminate the view of the transcendental collection, according to Chandrakirti, the root of samsara. And so, not only for yourself, but for all beings without exception, to train in the stages in order to do that. Yeah, so generate correct motivation for yourself. In front, imagine the Buddha, surrounded by the masters of methods and wisdom, and surrounding yourself, imagine all countless sentient beings undergoing the various types of suffering through karma, and that is rooted in afflictions, and that is rooted in the view of transcendental collection, right? And think you're going to lead them beyond that suffering, and you do that, start that leading process by leading them in the prayers. Yeah.
To the founder, the endowed transcendent destroyer, the one gone beyond, the foe destroyer, the completely perfected, fully awakened being, perfect in knowledge and in good conduct, Sagata, knower of the world, supreme guide of human beings to be tamed, teacher of gods and human beings, to you, the completely and fully awakened one, the endowed transcendent destroyer, the glorious conqueror, the subduer from a Shakya clan, I prostrate, make offerings, and go for refuge. To the founder, the endowed transcendent destroyer, the one gone beyond, the foe destroyer, the completely perfected, fully awakened being, perfect in knowledge and in good conduct, Sagata, knower of the world, supreme guide of human beings to be tamed, teacher of gods and human beings, to you, the completely and fully awakened one, the endowed transcendent destroyer, the glorious conqueror, the subduer from a Shakya clan, I prostrate, make offerings, and go for refuge. To the founder, the endowed transcendent destroyer, the one gone beyond, the foe destroyer, the completely perfected, fully awakened being, perfect in knowledge and in good conduct, Sagata, knower of the world, supreme guide of human beings to be tamed, teacher of gods and human beings, to you, the complete and fully awakened one, the endowed transcendent destroyer, the glorious conqueror, the subduer from a Shakya clan, I prostrate, make offerings, and go for refuge. When, O supreme amongst humans, you were born on this earth, you paced out 7 strides and then said, I am supreme in this world. To you who were wise then I prostrate. With pure bodies, forms supremely pure, wisdom ocean like a golden mountain, fame that blazes in the 3 worlds, winner of the best, Lord, to you I prostrate. With the supreme signs, face like a spotless moon, colour like gold, to you I prostrate. Dust free like you, the 3 worlds are not, incomparably wise one, to you I prostrate. The Saviour having great compassion, the Founder having all understanding, the field of merit with qualities like a vast ocean, to you the one gone to thusness I prostrate. The purity that frees one from attachment, and the virtue that frees one from the lower realms, the one path, the sublime pure reality, to the Dharma that pacifies I prostrate. Those who are liberated and also show the path to liberation, the holy field qualified with realizations, who are devoted to the moral precepts, to you the sublime community intending virtue I prostrate. Homage to the Supreme Buddha, homage to the Dharma refuge, homage to the great Sangha, to all 3 ever devout homage, to all worthy of respect, bowing with bodies as many as all realms, atoms in all aspects, with supreme faith that pay homage. Do not commit any non-virtuous actions, perform only perfect virtuous actions, subdue your mind thoroughly, this is the teachings of the Buddha. A star, a visual aberration, a flame of a lamp, an illusion, a drop of dew or a bubble, a dream, a flash of lightning, a cloud, see conditioned things as such. Through these merits may sentient beings attain the rank of all-seeing, subdue the foe faults, and be delivered from samsara's ocean, perturbed by the waves of aging, sickness, and death.
I prostrate.
To the Arya Triple Gem, thus did I hear at one time the Bhagavan was dwelling on a mass of vultuous mountain, in Rajgriha, together with a great community of monks and a great community of bodhisattvas. At that time the Bhagavan was absorbed in the concentration on the categories of phenomena called profound perception. Also at that time the Bodhisattva Mahasattva Arya Avalokiteshvara looked upon the very practice of the profound perfection of wisdom, and beheld those 5 aggregates also as empty of inherent nature. Then through the power of the Buddha, the Venerable Shariputra said this to the Bodhisattva Mahasattva Arya Avalokiteshvara: how should any son of a lineage train who wishes to practice the activities of the profound perfection of wisdom? He said that, and the Bodhisattva Mahasattva Arya Avalokiteshvara said this to the Venerable Sharavatiputra: Shariputra, any son of a lineage or daughter of a lineage who wishes to practice the activities of the profound perfection of wisdom, should look upon it like this, correctly and repeatedly, beholding those 5 aggregates also as empty of inherent nature. Form is empty, emptiness is form, emptiness is not other than form, form is also not other than emptiness. In the same way, feeling, discrimination, compositional factors, and consciousness are empty. Sharaputra, likewise, all phenomena are emptiness, without characteristics, unproduced, unceased, stainless, not without stain, not deficient, not fulfilled. Sharaputra, therefore, in emptiness, there is no form, no feeling, no discrimination, no compositional factors, no consciousness. No eye, no ear, no nose, no tongue, no body, no mind, no visual form, no sound, no odor, no taste, no object of touch, and no phenomenon. There is no eye element, and so on, up to and including no mind element and no mental consciousness element. There is no ignorance, no extinction of ignorance, and so on, up to and including no aging and death, and no extinction of aging and death. Similarly, there is no suffering, origination, cessation, and path. There is no exalted wisdom, no attainment, and also no non-attainment. Putra, therefore, because there is no attainment, bodhisattvas rely on and dwell in the perfection of wisdom, the mind without obscuration and without fear. Having completely passed beyond error, they reach the end point of nirvana. All the Buddhas who dwell in the 3 times also manifestly completely awaken to unsurpassable, perfect, complete enlightenment in reliance on the perfection of wisdom. Therefore, the mantra, the perfection of wisdom, the mantra of great knowledge, the unsurpassed mantra, the mantra equal to the unequal, the mantra that thoroughly pacifies all suffering should be known as truth, since it is not false. The mantra, the perfection of wisdom, is declared. Tayata gate gate paragate parasamgate buddhi soha. Sharaputra, the Bodhisattva Mahasattva, should train in the profound perfection of wisdom like that. Then the Bhagavan arose from that concentration and commended the Bodhisattva Mahasattva Arya Avalokiteshvara, saying, well said, son of a lineage, it is like that, it is like that. One should practice the profound perfection of wisdom just as you have indicated, even the Tathagatas rejoice. The Bhagavan, having thus spoken, and the Venerable Sharaputra and the Bodhisattva Mahasattva Arya Avalokiteshvara, and those surrounding in their entirety, along with the worlds of gods, humans, asuras, and Gadavas, were overjoyed and highly praised as spoken by the Bhagavan. Gathering of the kidneys in the 3 chakras, who abide in the holy yoga of using space. By powers of clairvoyance and magical emanation, look after a practitioner like a mother her child.
Akasamarajasna samarayapi tayata gata gata paragati parasamgati bodhiso. By the teachings of the 3 supreme jewels possessing the power of truth, may inner and outer hindrances be transformed, may they be dispelled, may they be pacified. May all negative forces opposed to the Dharma be completely pacified, and may the host of 80,000 obstacles be pacified. May we be separated from problems and harmful conditions to the Dharma. May all enjoyments be in accord with the Dharma, and may there be auspiciousness and perfect happiness here, right now. Foundation of all good qualities is a kind and perfect pure Guru. Correct devotion to the Guru is the root of the path. By clearly seeing this and applying great effort, please bless me to rely upon the Guru with great respect. Please bless me to rely upon the Guru with great respect. Understanding that the precious freedom of this rebirth is found only once is greatly meaningful and is difficult to find again. Please bless me to generate the mind that unceasingly day and night takes its essence. Please bless me to generate the mind that unceasingly day and night takes its essence. This life is impermanent as a water bubble. Remember how quickly it decays and death comes. After death, just like a shadow follows the body, the results of black and white karma follow. Finding firm and definite conviction in this, please bless me always to be careful, to abandon even the slightest negativities and accomplish all virtuous deeds. Please bless me always to be careful, to abandon even the slightest negativities and accomplish all virtuous deeds. Seeking samsaric pleasures is the door to all suffering. They are uncertain and cannot be relied upon. Recognizing these shortcomings, please bless me to generate the strong wish for the bliss of liberation. Please bless me to generate the strong wish for the bliss of liberation. Led by this pure thought, mindfulness, alertness, and great caution arise. The root of the teachings is keeping the Pratimoksha vows. Please bless me to accomplish this essential practice. Please bless me to accomplish this essential practice. Just as I have fallen into the sea of samsara, so have all mother migratory beings. Please bless me to see this and train in supreme bodhicitta and bear the responsibility of freeing migratory beings. Please bless me to see this and train in supreme bodhicitta and bear the responsibility of freeing migratory beings.
Even if I develop only bodhicitta, but I do not practice the 3 types of morality, I will not achieve enlightenment. With my clear recognition of this, please bless me to practice the Bodhisattva vows with great energy. Please bless me to practice the Bodhisattva vows with great energy. Once I pacify distractions, the wrong objects, and correctly analyze the meaning of reality, please bless me to generate quickly within my mind stream the unified path of calm abiding and special insight. Please bless me to generate quickly within my mind stream the unified path of calm abiding and special insight. Having become a pure vessel by training in the general path, please bless me to enter the holy gate with the fortunate ones, the supreme Vajra vehicle. Please bless me to enter the holy gate with the fortunate ones, the supreme Vajra vehicle. At that time, the basis of accomplishing the 2 attainments is keeping pure vows and samaya. As I become firmly convinced of this, please bless me to protect these vows and pledges on my life. Please bless me to protect these vows and pledges like my life. Then, having realized the importance of the 2 stages and the essence of the Vajrayana, by practicing with great energy and never giving up the 4 sessions, please bless me to realize the teachings of a holy Guru. Please bless me to realize the teachings of a holy Guru. Like that, may the Gurus who show the noble path and the spiritual friends who practice it have long lives. Please bless me to pacify completely all outer and inner hindrances. Please bless me to pacify completely all outer and inner hindrances. In all my lives, may they never be separated from perfect Gurus. May I enjoy the magnificent Dharma. By completing the qualities of his stages in the path, may I quickly attain the state of Vajradhara. May I quickly attain the state of Vajradhara. Sajipu ki jojimeto dramri
Sangye Chudan Sangye Chanam La Chanchu Batu Dani Gyapsuchi Dagi Chisheng Gibe Sonam Gi Jola Penche Sangye Jubasho Sangye Chudan Sangye Chanam La Chanchu Batu Dani Gyapsuchi Dagi Chisheng Gibe Sonam Gi Jola Penche Sangye Jubasho Sangye Chudan Sangye Chanam La Chanchu Batu Dani Gyapsuchi Dagi Chisheng Gibe Sonam Gi Jola Penche Sangye Drubasho.
Yeah, so we reach a section in the text regard to the selflessness, the selflessness of persons initially. And this particular text, initially it starts with the no self of person, and then starts with the view, transfer, or collection. Yeah, so to start with another quote, the quote from Nagarjuna's in praise of Dhammadhatu. Yeah, there it says, grasping at self and mine, long does one conceptualize the external. When one sees the two selflessness, nesses, plural, the seed of cyclic existence ceases. So that means that also Nagarjuna, he indicates the view, transfer, collection of self and mind. That basically is the cause for cyclic existence. And if you see the absence of that, you cease cyclic existence. Yeah, so same as Chandrakirti indicates in many ways. And there's no contradiction with regards to, if you say, inherent existence. Yeah, the apprehension of inherent existence is the root of samsara. Yeah, because both I and mine, yeah, self and mine, are referring to apprehension of inherent existence, right? So the apprehension is the same, yeah, of those two aspects. Yeah, so the apprehension of inherent existence is in general the root of samsara, right? According to the Prasangika consequent school. Yeah. Although the view of the transitory collection, as we know, every school of Buddhist philosophy has their own interpretation with regards to the view of transitory collection. Yeah. Then the Sutra school and the Vaibhasika school, that you have to understand, but it also comes up in the text, that the object of observation, yeah, as we call it, yeah, the object of observation of the view of the transitory collection has to be an existing phenomena. Yeah, you have to look at an existing self, and then you apprehend an inherent mind or an inherent I on top of that. Yeah, that's also the definition of the view of transitory collection, right? So in all schools, the object of observation, yeah, that should exist. Yeah, so in the Prasangika we say the mere self or the mere I. Yeah, that's object of observation, and then on top of that you superimpose this inherent I and mine. Yeah, so you have kind of a self that exists, the mere self, and on top of that you superimpose this inherent I and mine on top of that, yeah, and that you apprehend in that way. So that's the view of the transitory collection, right? It views the transitory collection of body and the mind, and then it apprehends an inherent I and mine. Yeah, but more precisely, the object of observation has to be an existing phenomena, and that's very clear in the Lamrim text and in this particular text as well. Yeah. So then, what do they say in the schools of Buddhist philosophy? Yeah. So you can just put forward the person, yeah, that is imputed upon the five aggregates, yeah, or either of the five aggregates, right? And then apprehend an I and mine on top of that. Yeah, that's one interpretation. Or as the autonomy school and below, they say, if you ask, okay, what is the person? Then they say there is a mental consciousness. That's the illustration of the person. Yeah, that you hold on. Yeah. So the Prasangika, they say the mere self is the object of observation. And then you superimpose an inherent I and mine on top of that. Yeah. The autonomy school says, what is the person? The person does not exist in a self-sufficient, substantial existing way, but if you ask what is the person, then they say the illustration of the person, yeah, the mental consciousness, that's the illustration of the person that goes from this life to the next. That is kind of the existing self. And on top of that, you apprehend, yeah, they don't say an inherent, you apprehend a self-sufficient, substantially existing self, yeah, or on top of that, yeah. So then the object of observation for the autonomy school exists, right? This consciousness, mental consciousness, that's the illustration of the person, yeah. The Prasangika school, as we know, they refute that consciousness, yeah, being. They don't refute that consciousness, but that consciousness being an illustration of a person, right? Yeah, because it's not findable, yeah, as we discussed already quite a few times before. Yeah. So then the mind-only school, there's two, right? And there's the one following scriptures, and there's the one following reasoning. And the one following scriptures follows Asanga and Vasubandhu's texts, right? And the mind-only school following reasoning follows Dignaga and Dharmakirti, yeah, the Pramanavartika, yeah. So those who follow scriptures, yeah, those who follow Asanga and Vasubandhu, and they also called true expertarians, yeah, they uphold this mind basis of all, yeah. So then they say this mind basis of all is the person, and the view of transitory collection is the object of observation is this mind basis of all, and then on top of that you apprehend a self-sufficient, substantially existing self. Yeah, so they put that forward. Yeah, so the object observation in these three schools is already different. You see that in the consequent school, in the autonomy school, and in the mind-only school following scriptures. Yeah, or the true aspectarians. Yeah, so. But in all those individual schools, the object observation exists. Yeah, the mere self exists for the Prasangika. The consciousness, this illustration of the person, exists for the autonomy school, and the mind basis of all exists for the true expectarians. Right. So the object observation in each and every school is an existing phenomena. But then what they superimpose does not exist. Yeah, the Prasangika says an inherent self. The Kasa, the autonomy school, says a self-sufficient, substantially existing self, as well as the mind-only school says this self-sufficient, substantially existing self that is apprehended on top of this mind basis of all. Yeah, so there's an object observation, and something is superimposed on top of that. You know, as Lama Zopa Rinpoche used to say, and one self is imputed on top of another one, and the one self that does not exist is this apprehended inherent self, and that's imputed upon an existing self. Yeah, so that makes sense if you think about the object observation has to be an existing phenomena. Yeah, and there's also sub-schools, as we come and touch upon today in the text as well, of the Vaibhasika, who put forward that the aggregates are the self, or the collection of the aggregates are the self. Yeah, so they put that forward as the object of observation. Yeah, which is not the self, according to the Prasangika, right? The mere self is being put forward as, that's also very clear in Jesson Gyaltsen's kind of commentary on this text, right? That the mere self is being put forward as the object of observation, yeah, the existing phenomena. And on top of that, you superimpose a self that does not exist. Yeah, so the view of the transitory collection, yeah, it views the transitory body and the mind in a particular way, and well, in which way? In a self or an I and a mine. Yeah, and according to the Prasangika school, I is then referring to the self of persons, and mine is referring to the self of phenomena. Yeah, so we have two aspects, right? We know in the consequent school, we say the root of samsara is the apprehension of inherent existence. Yeah, it has two aspects: phenomena and persons, right? Well, in the autonomy school, the difference between the self of a person and the self of phenomena is not from the point of view of the basis, but from the point of view of the object of refutation. Remember that? Yeah, in the tenets. Yeah, that in the consequent school, the difference between the self of phenomena and the self of the person is the object. Yeah, the object that is the basis upon which a particular self has been apprehended. Yeah. So either the object is a person or is a phenomena, because the way of apprehension of inherent existence is exactly the same in the consequent school for self of a person and self of phenomena. Remember that for those who did tenets? Yeah. Yeah. Well, in the autonomy school, they say the difference between the self of the person and the self of phenomena is not from the point of view of the way of apprehension, but from the point of view it's not from the point of view of the basis, but from the point of view of the way of apprehension, right? In the autonomy school, seeing a self as a self-sufficient, substantially existing self is the self of a person, and seeing a self as true existing phenomena is a self of phenomena. Yeah, so in the autonomy school, there's a distinction being made between the self of a person and the self of phenomena from the point of view of the way of apprehending, right? The object of apprehension. Yeah. Well, in the Prasangika school, the way of apprehending is exactly the same. Apprehension of inherent existence. It's only the basis that is different. The persons or phenomena, like a table or a body or a mind. Yeah. So the table, body, and the mind are phenomena, and the person, right, is the person that can be apprehended inherent. Yeah. So that's in the Prasangika school. The difference is made from the point of view of the basis. And it makes sense, because then you also make sense that both are the root of samsara, as Chandrakirti indicates, right? The view of transcendental collection has two aspects, I and mine. I refers to the self of a person, and mine refers to the self of phenomena. But the way the I or mine is apprehended is the same, yeah? Inherent, yeah? In an inherent way. Yeah? So that's kind of important distinction. And if you understand that distinction, you also understand why the root of samsara is different in those two schools, right? Because in the autonomy school, the root of samsara is a self-sufficient, substantial existing self. And why is that the root? Because if you eliminate that apprehension of that particular self, you can eliminate samsara. In the Prasangika school, we say that's not enough, because you can still apprehend inherent existence, consciousness to exist inherent, and based on that, generate afflictions. So the root of samsara is the apprehension of inherent existence. The self-sufficient, substantial existing self is a very coarse form of the apprehension of a self, right? You need, for the root of samsara, you need a subtler one, according to the Prasangika school, because that particular apprehension of inherent existence can still develop afflictions, in particular graving. Yeah, that put forward a graving at the time of death, when karma gets activated. Yeah, that grasping at an inherent consciousness, and then this craving can come up. Yeah, according to certain arguments. Yeah, so so the view of transcendental collection, you can see in the different schools of Buddhist philosophy, has different interpretations. Yeah, and the main difference is twofold. The object of observation is different in different schools, as you saw, as well as the way of apprehension is different, right? In the Prasangika, it's inherent existence. Autonomy school and below is a self-sufficient, substantial existing self. Yeah, and the object of observation is also different, because in the Prasangika school is the mere self. In the autonomy school is the mental consciousness. That's the illustration of the person. In the mind-only school, following scriptures, is this mind basis of all, right? Yeah, so you can see there are differences in the object of observation and the way the view of transcendental collection is explained from the point of view of how the I is apprehended. Yeah, yeah. So that's kind of a few things that that is important to understand, because the text is going to talk about those points. And then we go to the text. So yeah. Oops, yeah, so we still have a few verses left from the previous section. We talked about self, other, both, and no cause, right? That we discussed last week and the weeks before. Yeah, yeah. So this was kind of a few debates we discussed, and then there's a few verses left. Yeah, verse 115. No, that's where we left. Yeah. So there it says, still in relation, we talked about, no creator God as such, that there's no randomness in Buddhism. Everything is depending on cause and effect relationships, right? Yeah. And then in particular, dependent origination, yeah, and then there's no self existing from its own side, no other existing from its own side, and that also causes that there's no both, and there is no without a cause, right? Everything is dependent on cause, dependent on relationships, and particularly impermanent phenomena, depending on cause and effects. So then 115 it says, in that things originate entirely through dependence, such concepts as self-arising, yeah, because that's according to non-Buddhist views, that the self-arising self, yeah, without a cause, that cannot withstand if you analyze it correctly, because that means that it's spontaneous and you need a cause and cannot exist in and by itself, yeah, because it's in the nature of dependence. So this reason of dependent origination rips the shreds of the entire matrix of the false views. And as we talked often before, the view of the transitory collection, the dependent origination, the dependent origination helps us to not fall into the two extremes, right, of absolutism and nihilism. Dependent helps us not to fall into the extreme of absolutism, and origination or arising helps us not to fall into the stream of a nihilistic view, right? Then verse 116, there it says, such concepts would be in order if real entities did exist. That no such entities exist has already been analyzed. We talked about already there is no self from the point of view of an inherent self, right? So we said from not arisen from self, not arisen from other, means no inherent self and no inherent other, right? So no such entity exists has already been analyzed before. Without such an entity, those concepts would not come to be. For example, without fuel, there can be no fire. So whenever there's an apprehension of a self, that comes from somewhere, right? That nothing is spontaneously. Because fire also needs fuel to burn, or to be hot and burning. Ordinary beings are changed by conceptualizations. Yogis who do not conceptualize become free. So you want to be an ordinary being or you want to be a yogi? It's up to you. So he here talks about, of course, a yogic direct perceiver, right? A person who has a yogic direct perceiver is considered a yogi, right? So that means it has a direct perception of emptiness, and that, of course, eliminates all causes for samsara over time and is non-conceptual, right? The wise have said that the very cessation of conceptualizations, So here, the cessation of conceptualizations, not all conceptualizations, because we have constructive ones, like inference and things like that, with regards to the path, But here it talks about the very cessation of conceptualizations. It talks about the conceptualizations of true existence, inherent existence, right? That's important to understand. So is the fruit of refined analysis, So initially you analyze, and then you come to the elimination of apprehension of inherent existence, and first of all, elimination of conceptual forms of that, and then you have a direct perception of emptiness, and that is the direct antidote. Analysis in the treatises is not out of fondness for debate. You can debate back and forth and play with the words, but that doesn't do much. It's important. We see that among academics, and we see that among monastics, that sometimes, there's too much emphasis on wordplay, and then it's all nice and interesting, but it doesn't go to the point. So that's why it's very important to go beyond the words, and go on the meaning and sit down and contemplate. Of course, you need initially the debate to come to a conclusion, but you can go and debate inside out. At one point of time, you have done enough kind of study, and then it's important to sit down, because we need the three wisdoms, right? The wisdom from hearing, the wisdom from contemplation, and the wisdom from meditation. So you study, then you discuss. So debate in one way is kind of, if you do it correctly, it can develop into wisdom from contemplation, right? Because you analyze, and then you have to sit down and meditate. So that's important. Otherwise you never generate the wisdom from meditation, right? So is the fruit of refined analysis. Then verse, you're already there, 18? Did I do 18 already? No, only the first two lines, sorry. So because it aims at freedom, right? So you have to go beyond the words, otherwise you never achieve freedom. If other philosophical systems are undone in course of expounding suchness, however, there is no fault. Attachment, next one, 1819. Yeah. Attachment to one's own views and likewise aversion to others. That is not very beneficial, right? So that's also why in the debate I said before, if you really want to understand one school of thought well, then it's important to completely dive into it. Yeah, and in debate, you even defend that particular school. Yeah, even if you know, for example, that the mind only is not the most profound school with regards to the Prasangika. So you said, we're going to refute this anyway. But before refuting it, it's important to completely comprehend the mind only school. So you completely study the mind only school and you defend it in debate. How would the mind only school react? What kind of response will they give if somebody debates you the Prasangika school, right? So that happens in the debate courtyard. People debate from the Prasangika school and you give the answer from the mind only school as if you completely agree with the mind only school. Yeah, that's just a way to understand the mind only school first before going to the next schools, right? So that's very important. So when you study tenets, try to completely dive into it and try to see why does the mind only school uphold this view? What are the reasons, and does it make sense according to logic and scriptural references within the context? Yeah. So that's important. Yeah, because sometimes I'm working on something and then I saw some academics saying, Lama Tsongkhapa was not clear about his view of the mind basis of all, because there's one text he proves the mind basis of all and many other texts he refutes it. Then you think, good morning. Because they read, for example, the Kunshin Namshe, that's one commentary. There's a root text and an auto-commentary on the mind basis of all by Lama Tsongkhapa, right? So he wrote that from within the presentation of the mind only. Same as in the Essence of Eloquence. Yeah, the first part is written from within the presentation of the mind only. Right? So that's important to understand that context, and then you completely explain it from within that school, right? Yeah. So same with Lama Tsongkhapa's work on the Gaza, the mind basis of all root texts and the auto commentary on that. Yeah. Then Lama Tsongkhapa just explains it from within the mind only school, following scriptures, right? So then there's quotations from the sutras, from the sastras, and the reasons, the 8 reasons to prove the mind basis of all, and the different types of imprints and scripture references. It's all there, lined out, Yeah. So that's kind of that Lama Tsongkhapa presents that from the view of, if you are upholder of the mind only, you will explain it like this. Yeah. So then later, of course, in works like Eliminating Intent, he eliminates that, right? Yeah. So that's kind of, because the eliminating intent is based on Chandrakirti's interpretation of the Prasangika view, right? Yeah. So that's always important to understand. Attachments to one's own view and the likewise, that's why it's not very healthy, because you have to be open-minded and see other possibilities of thought or reasoning, scripture references. Therefore, it is by eliminating attachment and aversion and engaging in analysis that one swiftly gains freedom. Yeah, so that's true. If you do attach to your own view and you get stuck into that, then you don't progress, right? So we need to progress on the spiritual path. Okay, so now we come into the section from verse 120 onwards. That is the section of the selflessness of the persons, right? Of the person. Yeah, so seeing with their wisdom that all afflictions and all faults stem from the identity view. Yeah, so Tibetan Jimba translate the view of the transcendental collection as identity view, right? Grasping at the perishable collection, so that means it views the perishable or the momentary changing 5 aggregates, and then it apprehends and knowing that self is the focus of this identity view, right? So it apprehends an inherent self on top of that. Yeah, it projects an inherent self on top of, and it's a view, right? We know among the 6 root afflictions, the afflicted view is subdivided into 5, right? So actually you have 10 root afflictions, yeah? The first 5 are non-views, as we know. And the last 5 are views, meaning there's a reason, this is a view, you know, there's a reason behind it. It's not just merely, for example, the ignorance in the first, first set of 5, yeah, the ignorance that's a non-view, is just not knowing law of cause and effect, or not knowing karma, or not knowing the 3 jewels, or not knowing rebirth, right? Well, the last 5 is more with regards to having a tenet system behind it, to view things in a particular way. Yeah? So the view of the transitory collection is exactly what it is, right? It looks at the object of observation and existing phenomena, yeah? And then thinks there's this I on top of that, this imputed kind of superimposition of an inherent I, an inherent mind on top of that, right? Yeah. Yeah. So and knowing that the self is the focus of this identity view, yeah, focus or apprehends, right? Yeah, or holds, yeah. Then it is inherent I, yeah. The yogi engages in the negation of selfhood, yeah. So the yogi, of course, sees that is self, that the object observation, that self exists, yeah, the mere self exists, but then it separates that from how the I is apprehended, yeah, that the I is apprehended in the inherent way, yeah. So that the I is apprehended in the inherent way, the inherent self, that's the object of refutation, right, the object of negation. So there is this self that exists, and that you try to separate from the self that does not exist, right? Yeah. So that's kind of what you do in the reasoning to that's why to recognize the object of refutation, Namsakapa puts so much emphasis on that, because otherwise you can never separate those two. If you don't separate those two, you can never realize emptiness. Yeah, you have to have the emptiness of this inherent self. So if you always see this inherent self as being mixed with existing self, then you can never really refute it, because existing self you can never really refute, right? You can never realize there's no mere self, because there is a mere self. Yeah, so you need to get what we call to isolate this object of refutation. Yeah, so you remember the time it appeared when there was strong afflictions or fear for death, yeah, or fear in general, when there's a very strong sense of an I that came up. Yeah? And then you try to isolate that I in the sense to recognize how does it appear, how did it appear. So that's a conceptual consciousness that remembers how the I appears, right? So that's kind of a meaning generality of this inherent I, yeah, that remembrance consciousness, because the denshin, yeah, the memory, the consciousness that remembers is this conceptual consciousness that remembers the inherent self, right? How first of all, how the inherent I appeared. And then I try to generate a meaning generality of this inherent I, and then you use another consciousness, conceptual consciousness, to try to analyze that. Where is it then? Yeah, and then you generate another conceptual consciousness to see it's not with the body, and another one, it's not in the mind, it's not one with, it's not different from, you cannot find it. And then you refute this inherent I, right? And then you have the mere absence of an inherent I, and that's emptiness. Yeah, so if you always, and that's the most difficult part, because mostly when the I appears, to completely isolate it from the existing I is very difficult. Yeah, always in our meditations, it seems to be mixed, or it appears to be mixed, you know. So that what we talked about many times before, that needs a lot of accumulation of merit and purifying of the mind, yeah, to be able to process that aspect of, to see the difference between the inherent I and the existing I, right? That's a very important process. Otherwise, you can never refute this inherent I, right? You have to have a very clear aspect of how this inherent I appears, you know? Yeah. And then you refute it with the various reasons, Chandrakirti's sevenfold reasoning, for example, and then mainly the first 5, if you know of Chandrakirti's sevenfold reasoning, with the first five, you can realize emptiness, right? So no inherent inherent self, not one, not different, and not inherently dependent, and the aggregates not inherently depend on the inherent self, and then the inherent self does not inherently possess the aggregates, right? So those first 5, with that analytical approach, you realize emptiness. Because in many texts it says, when you look for the self and you cannot find it, that by itself will not lead to the realization of emptiness, it says. So there's a lot of confusion regarding those terms. Why does it not read? Because you have to join the object of refutation with this self. If you just have a self and you cannot find it, that would not by definition lead to a realization of emptiness. We say it's the method to realize emptiness. So a method means if you join the object of refutation with the self you're looking for, and then you cannot find it, that will realize emptiness. So sometimes it talks about in the scriptures that if you look for it and you cannot find it, will not, by definition, leads to the realization of emptiness, right? It's the method to lead to the realization of emptiness if you join it correctly with the object of refutation. So that's very clear in Jetsun Chögyal Gyaltsen's commentary, for example, on the Madhyamika Avatara, in the section on the sevenfold reasoning of Chandrakirti, And that's Lama Tsongkhapa put so much emphasis on this recognizing the object of refutation, right? That's so important. You can have very good reasoning, very sharp and concentration, everything, but if you don't recognize the target, then you don't know where to aim, right? So that's very important. So then when you meditate, then you recognize object refutation, and then you analyze, and then sometimes it fades away. Then you start over again. See again how the I appears, and then analyzing it. Because mostly when we start analyzing it fades away and seems to be mixed again, and it's very sneaky, So that's why it's very important to accumulate merit, purify the mind, and then start over again, see how the I appears, reason, and sometimes reason quick and fast is important. If you have this mellow meditation, oh look, there is this I that appears in the hand, and then I cannot find it in the body, is it? No, it's not there. These kind of meditations help, but sometimes you have to be very fast. Like, oh, that's how it appears. Where is it then? Not here, not there. Because if you do it faster, then the danger for the I to the inherent object refutation that appears at one point a little bit clearer, that it disappears again or becomes unclear. Over time it works like that. So sometimes it's good to sometimes be a bit fast and sometimes take your time, right? Okay, so that's the importance of the object refutation to be recognized. Then the next verse, 121. Then it talks about two, pre-Buddhist schools. I'm not an expert in those schools, the Samkhya and the Vaisesika schools, so I'm not going to elaborate on all their kind of tenet systems, because also I don't know inside out. And I said many times, I don't know if I've said many times, but a few times, the way their tenets are presented in our books and the way they present their own tenets in their books is sometimes different. So that's important to know as well. When I was studying Pramanavartika, I got quite frustrated sometimes because the presentations of the Hindu schools is very coarse in many of our scriptures, right? And then I had a lot of friends in Bangalore, and few were very well versed in Hindu philosophy, and then you have discussions with them, and then slightly different. So maybe that we should do, right? We should engage in debate with them rather than only focus upon what we have in our scriptures, right? Although the reasoning and the logic is extremely profound, and you can train in that, right? Yeah. Okay, so then the Samkhyas, they say that the self is a consumer, a permanent entity, and non-creator. It's devoid of qualities and inert, meaning it's omnipresent. Yeah, that is what the Trithagatas postulate. Yeah, so this kind of, and we know that that's not too difficult to refute, right? And permanent entity, from the point of view of non-momentary changing, that's very easy to refute. But from the point of view of being internal or eternal, existing forever, that's kind of a different interpretation of permanence, right? So also that we have to be very precise. What is the definition of permanence in our scriptures, and what's the definition of permanence in the scriptures of the person we refute, right? Because sometimes they indicate a kind of eternal self, but we also, to a certain extent, accept, right, that the mere self continues and it has no beginning and no end, right? So that's important to take into account as well. Yeah. But yeah, if it's a permanent self that is non-changing and doesn't create anything and is kind of an omnipresent aspect without cause, then of course that kind of self we cannot put forward, right? Yeah. Then the Vaishekas, they hold on to the next two lines of 121. On the basis of slight and minor variations, Trithagata diverge into different positions. Yeah, it's just different interpretation of self. Yeah, but then that's been refuted in verse 122, 123, and 124 and 25. Yeah. So then 122. Yeah. Just look over my shoulder, and it's there. It's so high tech. People online, those who've been in Jamyang, they know. But we have screens. They come out of the ground. Normally they're in a box. I mean, it looks out of the ground, but actually it's behind the altar, and it's in a box. And then they come out when they need it. And then when they're done, they go back to sleep, and they go back in the box, and they close the box, and you can see the altar again perfectly. It's quite interesting, isn't it? Yeah, high tech. Yeah, today Verma Konchok is doing everything for us. He's doing the tech, he's doing the UMSE, he's doing the, what else? Taking care of the internet and people online and everything. And the Q&A in the end, yeah. Okay, so let's refute those kind of views of a self that is a permanent entity and without a cause, omnipresent, right? There it says, like a barren woman's child is devoid of arising, means is unborn, right? Yeah, so similar, if there is a self is kind of omnipresent and unborn, yeah, such a self simply does not exist, yeah, because we know the mere self is there since beginner's lifetime, right? The mere self exists, right? And the mere self, yeah, is also kind of an impermanent phenomena, right? That the person is an impermanent phenomena, right? That goes, so the mere self is an aspect of that changes and the self is being generated and cause and effect related aspects, right? So here it says, like the barren woman child is devoid of rising, means unborn, so such a self simply does not exist. It also cannot be the basis for grasping at an I. Yeah, so why can it not be the basis of grasping at an I? Because the basis for the grasping at an I, we just talked about, it needs to be an existing phenomena, right? Yeah, the object of observation has to be an existing phenomena. So if your object of observation does not exist, then you cannot postulate the grasping on an I on top of that. Because, it's kind of, reasoning being used. Because the reason is being used if you accept that the basis needs to exist. Yeah, the object of observation needs to exist, right? So there's also scripture references for that. Yeah. It cannot be claimed to exist even on the conventional level. Yeah, we talked about previously certain schools of Buddhist philosophy that say, okay, it does not exist ultimately, but it exists conventionally. Yeah. So in the Prasangika we say an inherent self does not exist ultimately, but also conventionally it does not exist. Yeah, there is no inherent self, full stop. Yeah, yeah. So that's kind of the presentation of the Prasangika, of course, to indicate there is, even on the conventional level, there is no. Then we say, but conventionally we apprehend a self, but still that self does not exist. Yeah, you remember in the Prasangika school we say the conventional truth cannot be divided into two, true and false, because conventional truth is always false, according to the Prasangika school. Well, the autonomous school subdivides conventional truth into two, true and false. And then the Prasangika school says the only way you can divide is from the point of view of worldly conventions. That means that what we see with our eye consciousness, the colors and the shape, from a worldly perspective, that is true. But that the color and the shape, of the computer appears to be two computers, well, it's one, then that's false, right? Yeah. So from a worldly perspective, we make a distinction between true and false. Yeah, but that's only from a worldly perspective. Yeah, because all the objects that appear, all conventional realities that appear, are always mistaken, right? As we know. Yeah, because every consciousness that apprehends conventional truths, or to which conventional truths appear in the continuity of a sentient being, are mistaken. Yeah, so only the ultimate reality appearing to direct perception is non-mistaken. For the rest, all the forms of consciousness are mistaken, right, as we talked about. Yeah. Then verse 1 to 3. Yeah. Since all the various attributes of such self as proposed before by those pre- or non-Buddhist schools, in one treatise after another by the Tritadakas, are undone by this logical proof that it is on horizon, which they accept, unborn, so that is not possible, according to our school, to Prasangika, None of the attributes of their self remain tenable, so whatever they put forward it doesn't hold on into reasoning, right? It can be easily refuted. Thus no self separate, next verse, 1, 2, 4. Thus no self separate from the aggregates exists. For there is no apprehension of a self apart from the aggregates. So there's no inherent different entity. If there's so this is very interesting. That came up in the last BP. We talked about it last BP weekend. That the Kasa, we say the coarse form of a self and the subtle form of a self. Remember, in the autonomy school, especially the Yogacarya Svatantrika Madhyamaka, which is based on the Abhishamalankara, this particular interpretation, then we say the coarse form of a self is a permanent, unitary, independent self. And the subtle form of a self is the self-sufficient, substantial existing self, right? That's as we have normally always presented like that. That is according to the Yogacarya Svatantrika Madhyamaka interpretation based on the Abhishamalankara, or the clear ornament of realization. You have two types of a self, remember, a coarse one and a subtle. The coarse one is the permanent, unitary, independent self, and the subtle one is the self-sufficient, substantial existing self. So that's one interpretation. Actually, that's one interpretation. According to the Pramanavartika literature, the texts especially by Dhammakirti, from that point of view, the mind-only presentation, then they make a distinction. They make a different distinction. They say the self-sufficient, substantial existing self, being of different characteristics then the body is a coarse one. And the self-sufficient substantial existing self being one with the aggregates is a subtler one. Yeah, so they make a distinction between coarse and subtle from the point of view of different and one with. Remember those? So that's kind of in the Paramahanavatika literature it talks about that. Yeah, so that's a kind of different interpretation, right? And in the Prasangika school, then there is a division between mine and I. And mine is referring to empty, and mine is referring to no self. Yeah, among the four aspects of the truth of suffering. Yeah, but then the distinction is based from the point of view of the base, but not from the point of view of coarse and subtle difference, because I and mine are both apprehended in inherent, so there's no difference in coarser and subtle aspects, right? So in the last BP weekend we talked about those points a little bit. Yeah, so that means that when we always say, oh, the coarse one, according to the autonomy school and below, is this self-sufficient, so this coarse one is this permanent, unitary, independent self. And the subtle one is this self-sufficient, substantial existing self. That's what we always have used up to now. And that's true for the point of view of the Yogacharyas, Svatandika, Madhyamaka school, following the Abhishamalankara, yeah, the clear ornament for realizations. Then in the Paramahanavatika literature, it's slightly different. Yeah? The mind-only school presents the self-sufficient, substantial existing self is taken for both, for the coarse one and for the subtle one. The only difference here is that for the coarse one, they put as different characteristics than the aggregates, and for the subtle one, this self-sufficient, substantial existing self as one with aggregates. And that makes sense, because it's easier to refute something as different from your aggregates than it is that it's one with your aggregates, from the point of view of seeing, if it's explained from the point of view of seeing it as different characteristics than the body and the mind. And that's exactly why the Prasangika school says that's an acquired form of grasping at a self. And then the self-sufficient, substantial existing self that seems to be mixed with aggregates, according to a certain interpretation, that seems to be the innate grasping of this particular self, of the self-sufficient, substantial existing self. So this makes a lot of sense, because that what has been seen as different from the aggregates of different characteristics is an acquired one. It's much easier to abandon than the innate one, right? Yeah. So, and it's a coarser one. Yeah. That's also what it says that goes. Yeah. One of the reasons being used here, right? Yeah. So that's just the background of the coarser form of self, subtler form of self in the different schools of Buddhist philosophy, right? Yeah, yeah. Because normally in the Prasangika we say the coarser one is the self-sufficient, substantial existing self, and the subtler one is the inherent self, right? Yeah. So that's also true, but we haven't talked. I think on the Wednesday evenings we haven't talked about the Paramahanavatika literature, right? The Dhammakirti's interpretation of those two selves. Yeah, so that relates with this verse, because it's easier to eliminate a self-sufficient, substantial existing self to be seen as being of different characteristics than the body and the mind. Yeah, of different characteristics from the aggregates. Yeah, because a coarser one, while the self-sufficient, substantial existing self being one with the aggregates is a more subtler one. Yeah, so that's kind of, yeah, just some extra information. Yeah, because in verse 124, there it says, "Thus no self separate from the aggregates exist," right? There is no self separate from the aggregates. So those other non-Buddhist schools, they say there is this self, that it is non-unborn and, without cause and different entity. Yeah, so that's not possible. Yeah, there is no self apart from the aggregates. Yeah, there is no separate entity. Yeah, there's no substantial real self that is of a different characteristic than the body and the mind, as some non-Buddhist schools put forward. Right, so that self does not exist. Yeah. Then it says in the last two lines of 124, it's also unacceptable to be the basis for beings I clinging, right? Why is also unacceptable? Because a self as being different or separate from the aggregates does not exist, so it can never be the basis for grasping at an I. Yeah, here you talk about the view of transitory collection, and the view of transitory collection as an object of observation, and the object of observation has to exist. Yeah, so that's what it says. For the identity view is presented even in those unaware of such a self. Yeah, so here it talks about unaware of such a self. Yeah, so that means that the innate grasping, yeah, we talk about innate grasping. What you propose, this I, and the grasping at that I, that's still an acquired one. And an acquired grasping can never be the root of samsara. Yeah, because there are many creatures who don't have tenet systems and have newly generated acquired grasping at a self, right? Yeah, so like animals, for example, they all have innate grasping, yeah, but they don't have tenet systems to produce an acquired grasping, right? Yeah. So that what you propose is an acquired one, and it can never be the basis for self-grasping, because there are beings who grasp at a self in an innate way, yeah, and not what you put forward is an acquired one. Yeah, so that's another reason. So from two different angles, this is being refuted, right? That there's nothing separate from the aggregates, and it can be the suitable base for I clinging, because there are beings without this aspect of acquired grasping, but still have innate grasping, right? Yeah. Those who have spent many eons in the animal realm, for example, and so on, do not perceive this unborn permanent entity. Yeah, because they don't have the concepts to produce an acquired grasping, right? Animals only have an innate grasping at itself. Yeah, that's very obvious. If you look at dogs and cats and monkeys and things and birds we talk about many times, it's very clear. They have this grasping. When they fight over the food, normally they're friends, but when there's food, no friends. Yeah, I need this, and then they fight. Yeah, or when there's territory and they have to protect, and this is I. Yeah, or you see this pheasant, this male pheasant, has a few girlfriends. He wants to have one more girlfriend who's in the neighborhood, and then in Land of Joy there's one. I don't know if he still exists. He was a bit bald last time I was there. He was old, but still. He was standing there on this stone and showing off. How beautiful I am. Yeah. And then another young pheasant came, and the young pheasant looked much better because he was just old and bald, and But then a young pheasant came. The old one could only walk on one foot because the other one he hurt or he was fighting before. But still on one foot he went after this young one. I'm gonna get him. My girlfriends, not yours. Yeah. So it's you can see even in the animal realm, there's a very strong aspect of attachment, there's a very strong aspect of aversion, and it's all rooted in the sense of I, right? This innate grasping in itself. It's very clear, very clear. But the bird is not sitting there, oh, maybe my eye is of different characteristics than my body. Yeah, the bird would never think like that. Yeah. So that's what it says here, That the animal realm, they don't have this this eye. Maybe if it's emanation of various, then maybe a different story, and they might have a conversation. But generally speaking, that's not the case, right? Yeah. Yet one sees that eye clinging operates in those beings as well, right? So there is thus no self that's separate from the aggregates. Yeah, so. So the separate from the aggregates, that kind of, if you say separate from the aggregates, is self-sufficient, substantial existing self, being of different characteristics than the aggregates, according to the Prasangika school, that's an acquired grasping at a self, right? So that's important to understand. Then these verses make sense. Yeah.
Then there's a few verses regarding negating the self, being upheld by Buddhists, because the Buddha skillfully had sutras where the Buddha said there is a self, in order for people not to fall into wrong views and extreme views of nihilism, and they forget all about karma. That's why the Buddha was so skillful to actually teach them temporarily there is a self, to prevent them from falling into extremes of a nihilistic view, right? And then, of course, the different schools of Buddhist tenets, been developed, So then it says a self that is separate from the aggregates does not exist. The object of the identity view is thus the aggregates alone, right? So the object of observation are the mere aggregates, or the mere self. Some assert the basis of this identity view to be the 5 aggregates. So there's one sub-school in the Vaibhasika school who actually uphold this view that the aggregates are the self. And others, the mind alone. The mind-only school, following scriptures, they put the mind basis of all as a self, and the autonomy school and below in general, they put this mental consciousness as the illustration of the person as a self, or the person. So that's been refuted, by the Prasangika, as we know. They are not the object of observation, because they just basically do not exist. For the object of observation, it has to exist. So the mere self is the object of observation, according to the consequent school. So now, if the aggregates are the self, or consciousness, in that manner, so if, like one of the Vaibhasika schools, sub-schools, they say that the aggregates are the self, and autonomy school and below, in general speaking, they say that the consciousness, the mental consciousness that goes from this life to the next life is the self. Then, since they are multiple, the self would also be multiple, because the aggregates are multiple, and even consciousness is multiple, right? From the point of view of moments, it's so many moments in consciousness. And the self does not appear to have all those different attributes, or to have the different characteristics, right? The self would also be substantial. Viewing it would not be an error, because doing so would pertain to a substantial reality. And also we say it's not like cat and dog being completely different. So there's no self as a separate entity from your aggregates, right? Like a cat and a dog. That doesn't appear like that. Another meditation, as we know, is to see there is no I separate from your body and your mind, is just to take away pieces of your body. If you take away your legs, and you take away your arms, and you take away your chest, and you take away your head, then the I doesn't arise anymore. But if the I exists as a separate entity, the more you take away of your body, the more the I should arise, right? The clearer it should become. Same if you have one yellow or orange colored rice in just a pile of white rice, the more you take the white rice away, then this orange colored rice will appear clearer, right? So that's exactly the same. So if you take away parts of your body and this I doesn't arise anymore, then it's clear that it's not separate from your aggregates, right? Or it's separate from your body. I went to 1 through 7 already. I didn't tell you. No worries. So the aggregates are the self, and since they are multiple, the self will be multiple. So it means that, also from the point of view, it cannot be the same. Same logic applies, right? If it cannot be the same, because there's many a number and the self appears. And that's, you see here again, you have to get the object of refutation clear, and the self, the inherent self, appears to be unitary. It appears to be a singular thing, without various aspects. And your body has various aspects, your mind has various aspects, so how can you have this self that exists and not having all those aspects if you think it's even the same as your body and mind? So that's the same reason applies, right? Then 128. Yeah. The self would definitely terminate at the moment of nirvana, right? If the self, if the aggregates are the self, and consciousness, the contaminated consciousness is the self, then when you go into non-abiding nirvana, I didn't say that. When you go into nirvana without remainder, when you leave, when you die, you have achieved nirvana, and then first of all you have nirvana with remainder, because the contaminated aggregates are generated from your previous lifetime, and you're reborn, and you're not an arat yet, or not liberated yet, and then you achieve in that lifetime liberation, then your body is still created from the previous lifetime, right? So it's still contaminated, as we say. Yeah. So then, if you then go to the next lifetime, you have to leave that behind. So that means the aggregates can never be the self, because then at the time of nirvana, there is no person anymore. And that's very interesting. That the mind-only school following scriptures and some of the lower schools, they say the same thing. When you achieve nirvana, then the person ceases to exist. Right? It's a very funny kind of interpretation. Yeah, we know what ceases to exist is not the continuity of consciousness, but the contaminated continuity of consciousness ceases to exist. Right? Yeah. But yeah, if you think that the aggregates are the self, then that's it, nirvana. Right? Yeah. So that becomes a kind of a nihilistic view. Yeah. And prior to nirvana, the self would rise and vanish every moment, every instant, because the body and the mind is constantly coming and going. Yeah, so there is no self that always remains, if it's the aggregates or if it's consciousness. Yeah, because consciousness and the aggregates, they're just constantly in the nature of change, right? So, and the self seems to be this singular, independent thing, this independent entity, without that aspect of change, so that's not possible. With no agent, or the self as an agent, right? None of its effects would be, right? So, as an act done by one would be a fruit repeatedly by others, meaning by other aggregates. Yeah, if you die, you create a lot of karma in this life. You die, and if the self then dies, because if you say the aggregates are the self or the consciousness, which is kind of the self in this life that leave behind, and in the next lifetime you experience the result of what you've created in previous lifetimes, and that's a different self. So that's also doesn't make any sense. Yeah, that's not a reasoning being used. You may say there is no fault because instants share the same continuity. Yeah, that would be the answer. Yeah, but you go a step too far. The self is changing. It's the continuity, right? Yeah. But we have already shown to analysis the facts of such a continua. Means because those who accept the continuity of consciousness, or this mental consciousness illustration of the person to be the self, they also accept that consciousness to exist inherent. And we cannot have a continuity that's inherent, because if there's inherent consciousness, it can never be in continuum. Because it can never relate to past and future moments. If things are inherent, it can never be in continuum. It either exists or does not exist. That's it. It can never develop in future moments of consciousness. Therefore, the aggregates and the mind cannot be the self. That's the conclusion. The world means the aggregates is finite, and so on, have not been declared. So here there's this aspect of the Buddha, when the Buddha said, is there an end to samsara, or is there no end to samsara? And then what did Buddha say? Nothing. He didn't answer. So there's a whole list of different questions the Buddha didn't answer. But with regards to the aggregates and aspects of that, then the Buddha explained, right? So here there's a kind of aspect relating with, if you think, as has been said above, that the aggregates are finite, yeah, because they stop and then the self stop, then that's in contradiction with the teaching of the Buddha. Because other questions the Buddha did answer, right? Yeah, but there's just a few questions the Buddha did not answer. Yeah, okay, maybe we stop at 2129. Yeah, and then we can do some questions.
Okay, so we'll go to the people online first. Droma, you've got a question?
I guess
Hi.
So this is kind of in general for us as people who don't live in a monastery. What do you think the best way to develop the wisdom of contemplation is without debate partners?
Ale, you have AI debate partners these days or not? You have to train.
No.
That would be interesting to have a robot standing in front of you.
AI.
I saw some robots try to play football. They didn't do a very good job. Yeah, with debate, I don't know. But yeah, but the main thing is that discussions helps a lot, right? We engage in discussions in the various study programs, because discussions is important to digest the material, but also use reasoning. And sometimes somebody else might have a different reasoning behind something, and that you can learn from. And if you talk about things, it stays better. To retain the material, it helps, right? So with discussions, then it can be very helpful as well, yeah? To retain the material, to use reasoning, if it's really based on reasoning, and you have a very good flowing discussion back and forth using different reasoning and analyzing things, then it has a similar effect, right? Yeah. Otherwise, you just, that's what the thing with debate is you have to invest a lot of time into it to get the benefits out of it, right? Even if you do it all in English, you know? Yeah, that's really needed. So for the time being, that's what we try to accomplish in study programs with these discussion questions and discussion sessions, rather than just being a review of a teaching assistant, but to have kind of put questions into the group and let people think and analyze. Yeah, that's really needed. Yeah, and then of course we have our analytical meditation, right? So the more you read and the more you think. Also, when you read, just don't try to read it in a way as a novel, right? Try to see, why is this being said? Okay, this text said it. Try to see another text. What does it say there? What does it say there? What does it say there? Yeah, try to be very active in analyzing what you're reading. Yeah, so then also you can say, oh yes, because in this commentary it says this, in that commentary it says this scholar give that reason, that scholar give that reason. So this makes sense, and that also makes sense because of this and this and this, right? So that you have to put quite some effort in. And even if you have read a text, it's even for us, you know, if we have debated things inside out, and we read the text again, then still we have a new insight. Yeah, so that's to have this, I would say, this continued kind of effort in analyzing, and never easy being satisfied, because we sometimes easily satisfied, oh yeah, that's how it is, and then we satisfied. Yeah, so we in the monastic systems we learn, the teachers always tells us, don't be easily satisfied with an answer. Yeah, so and then the more you read and the more you analyze yourself, then eventually it helps you to generate this wisdom of contemplation, and then you sit down and you contemplate. Yeah, so you study various commentaries, and then sometimes you sit down and put the books away and think about, why does this teacher says this and that commentary that and that commentary that, and then sometimes it can happen that you get this insight of, aha, that's the reason, and then you go back and check the commentaries and you learn more.
Okay. Yeah. Thank you very much.
But debate is just, for a person like me, being lazy by nature, is a very good boost, because you have to study, because every day is like an exam, you know. Otherwise, out of the monastery, I just cannot study that much as I do in the monastery. That's very clear, you know. So that's, of course, there's great benefits of these kind of communities, no? Yeah. So maybe we should have daily exams, but then people freak out with the word exams.
Yeah.
No, but you know what I mean, right? So to try to analyze and try to, in discussions, also try to
force questions and try to get people's kind of logic and reasoning and what they have read in other kind of commentaries. That's kind of the way to probably move forward in that direction. No?
Okay.
Yeah?
Yeah, thank you. Mm-hmm. Yeah. Very helpful.
Yeah.
Okay, B, you got a question?
Yes, please.
Yeah.
I have two questions, please.
Two, yeah.
The simpler one first.
Yeah, please.
I not realized until today there are two ways of looking at the self-sufficient, substantially self.
Yeah.
So one is with aggregate and one is separate from the aggregate. So for the Swatantrika school that says that the self-sufficient substantial self that is subtle, is that with or separate from aggregate?
The subtle is with, but that's mainly the mind-only interpretation within the Pranavatika literature, right? They talk about it.
But in the canon, not in the Pranavatika.
Yeah, in the because Pranavatika.
In the canon, when they usually posit that the self-sufficient substantial self is subtle and then the unitary permanent self.
There's various works on the mind-only school, right? But I was referring specifically to the Pranavatika literature. Then that's a combination between the Sautantrika and Chittamatra, right? And then the main emphasis of the Chittamatra within that kind of literature is this distinction between the self-sufficient substantial existing self being as a different characteristic than the aggregates being coarse and being one with aggregates being subtle. Yeah.
But my question is that when we study the canon, where I think it's the Swatantrika school and the Sautantrika school, or maybe it's the Swatantrika school, that makes the distinction of subtle and coarse self. So
then it's the same as in the Abhishamalakara, right? Permanent unity.
Actually, it's the Sautantrika school that say that the subtle self is the self-sufficient substantial self.
Correct.
So that self, what the Sautantrika school, is that one or with aggregate or separate from aggregate?
They don't make a distinction between those two. Yeah, but to analyze it does not exist, they use that same reasoning, one with or different from. Yeah, but in a Sautantrika school, there's no distinction between how the mind-only school presented in the Pranavatika literature of two aspects. Of one with and different from, of coarse and subtle differences.
Okay. All right. Yeah. Now, second question. I asked about this also. I'm sorry that I'm bringing this up again. I recently realized I have a long running misconception about two truths.
The two truths.
Yes. Somehow in my mind, I thought ultimate truth refers to emptiness, and then the conventional truth refers to the basis of emptiness. But I'm realizing that is not quite right. The conventional truth, as defined as Vishalaja says, is always a falsity. So it's really the conventional truth is really how the basis of emptiness appears to sentient beings. Anybody who's not a Buddha yet, even Arya in the ground, in the post-meditative state, conventionality is still, the mere conventionality still appear to them with some appearance of resistance. Yeah. And that's why it's a falsity.
Correct.
Okay. So if that is the case, it seems to me it will be. So I'm stuck because at the same time, truth has always been said to apply to both sentient beings and the Buddha. Remember, you were talking about the definition of the truth, where there are two parts. They added the second part to include the Buddha's mind. So they intend the two truths apply also to the Buddha. But yet, at the same time, the conventional truth is defined in such a way that it applies only to sentient beings. So that's the part I'm getting confused.
Yeah. So first of all, you said the basis of emptiness is conventional truth. That doesn't make that if you say then, okay, emptiness being empty of emptiness. right? The emptiness of emptiness. Yeah, so then also the base is the ultimate truth, right?
No. I conventional
just
truth.
one more.
Phenomena.
Yeah, but generally speaking, the easiest way. Generally speaking, the easiest way to make a distinction, although the definitions are extremely long, but the main purpose to think is like, okay, emptiness is an ultimate truth. Everything that exists that is not emptiness is a conventional truth.
Yes. But it sounds very simple. It's just simply a definition.
Yeah.
But when I think about it, the contradiction was what I just explained.
From the Buddha's point of view.
Because anything that is not ultimate truth, that's not emptiness, conventional truth. And conventional truth is also said to be falsity. And such a situation applies only to sentient being. Because obviously
the falsity, yes.
Because Buddha does not falsity.
No.
Buddha does not falsity.
No. But the Buddha perceives.
So if we say the conventional truth is always a falsity, then it has to be a definition of conventional truth that applies only to sentient being.
No. Yeah. So
right?
Yeah.
But yet they say truth applies to Buddha also.
Yeah. Because the Buddha, to the Buddha, emptiness appears and things that are not emptiness appear, right?
Yes.
Yes, but the Buddha doesn't, the conventional aspects that appear to the Buddha, they don't appear in a mistaken way, right?
Yes.
So when we define conventional truth as a concealing truth, that is from the point of view of sentient beings, right? So you always have to see where does the definition fit in, if it's for sentient beings or it's for the level of Buddhahood. Yeah, that's two different things.
So it's for sentient beings, that's what I'm saying.
Yeah.
Is that right?
Yeah, so the concealing truth, the aspect of what Chandrakirti indicates as the definition and the nature of conventional truth being concealing truth is from the point of view of sentient beings, right?
Yes.
Yeah. So Buddha is a different story.
Yes.
So
then why is the truth the way it defines say to apply to the Buddha and sentient beings? If conventional truth is always a falsity.
No, for the Buddha it's not a falsity.
But in the text they say if you call it conventional truth is a falsity. There is one line in the text that says the conventional. There isn't a line in the text that actually says something like Buddha perceived conventional truth without falsity.
Exactly.
It doesn't say
very good line.
No, it doesn't say that.
Oh, it doesn't say that.
It doesn't say that. I kept looking for that line, but it doesn't say that.
You found a perfect quote, but no, joking. Yeah, because it's just a conventional truth is generally speaking defined as that it also the way it's been apprehended as a conventional truth, right?
Precisely. By sentient beings.
Yeah, by sentient beings is a falsity, and for Buddhas it's not a falsity. It's just that the only distinction is there. For the rest, you just think what is emptiness is ultimate truth, and everything else that exists is a conventional truth.
Okay. Is it just me? Do any of my classmates get what I'm saying? Please jump in.
Jump.
Because you already. I think it's the time I'm saying this. I'm repeating myself.
Yeah.
Conventional truth is said to be always a falsity, but yet all phenomena are divided exhaustively out of truth and conventional truth. And at the same time, this truth, the way it is defined, applies also to Buddha.
Yeah.
That's a contradiction.
There's no contradiction. Because for Buddha, you have a distinction of what is emptiness and what is not emptiness, right? What is realized as an ultimate truth and what's realized as a conventional truth. That is also true in the continuity of a Buddha, because the Buddha can see this is emptiness and that is not emptiness.
Yes, but here they are not talking emptiness as in like emptiness and the pot. Pot is not emptiness and the emptiness. But the is always a conventional truth for sentient being.
Yeah, but there's two different things, right? How conventional truth appeals to the Buddha and how conventional truth appeals to sentient beings is different, right?
Okay, is a conventional truth for the Buddha?
Yes.
So Buddha sees pot as truly existent?
No.
Or there's a true existence
No.
of the pot, Buddha?
The Buddha.
Then if no, then why is it called conventional truth?
Because it's not the ultimate truth, and it exists.
Well, to me, that's not a good reason.
Huh? No, that's a pervading. It's a very much pervading reason.
Because it is not a good reason, because conventional truth has been stated to always be a falsity.
Yeah. No,
So
always.
and Buddha obviously doesn't see falsity. So why is pot falsity for the Buddha?
No, there's no falsity for the Buddha. It's only for sentient beings, right? That aspect.
Okay.
Yeah.
But you do say that pot is a conventional truth for the Buddha.
Correct.
And conventional truth is said to be a falsity.
Not correct. You talk about the mind.
So conventional truth is not a falsity?
Not for the Buddha.
So there are two types of conventional truth.
No.
So there are two ways to define conventional truth.
It's just how conventional truths appear, right? So and how conventional truths are defined. Then there's a difference, because conventional truths remain conventional truths, but how they are defined for sentient beings. You have conventional truth in general, which is for the Buddhas and for sentient being, right? And you have the conventional.
But the text doesn't give a different definition of conventional truth for the Buddha.
Yeah, they do.
It doesn't say anywhere that conventional truth for the Buddha is not a falsity.
That the Buddha realized it as a conventional truth, right?
What does it mean when you say Buddha realized as a conventional truth?
Yeah.
What does it mean?
What does it mean that the Buddha sees, oh, look, a pot, that's a conventional truth? Well, because it's not emptiness, and emptiness is an ultimate truth. So the Buddha realizes both simultaneously, right? But still, there's a distinction, even for the mind of the Buddha, there's a distinction between a house and the emptiness of the house, right? There's two different realities.
Well, actually, in the chapter that talks about the Buddha's perception,
Yeah.
they talk about Buddha's omniscient mind that sees the mode, and Buddha's perception that sees the variety. So a group of my classmates in another class, we got clever and say that.
Oh, now you...
We don't say Buddha conventional truth. We say Buddha sees variety.
Yeah.
But that you, yeah.
Variety of conventional realities.
Yeah. Okay. All right.
Yeah, just think that you know what is emptiness is ultimate truth. Everything that exists is not emptiness is a conventional truth. That's a very clear-cut distinction. And then for sentient beings it appears in a mistaken way, and for Buddhas it does not. Yeah. Yeah, you meditate on this.
All right.
You're gonna do a summer retreat for a few weeks. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. Thank you, Geshe.
Yeah, thank you.
Okay, in the Gompa, do you have any questions?
Hi Geshe, I wasn't going to ask about the two truths, but now that this conversation came up, so now I'm thinking, okay, what's my confusions? And I was wondering, because I think we kind of hear about realities, or like as if there's like different dimensions going on, kind of like in Western we talk about, oh, they live in one reality and there's a different reality, and it's almost as if it's two separate things. But as I've been going through these classes, I was wondering, is it more that it's like, it's two things that are true, like two facts, so you've got everything is empty of ultimate reality, everything is empty of inherent existence. That's one thing that's true. But then there's also something that's going on. Another fact of reality is how they are occurring conventionally. And within that conventional existence, there's this subjective aspect which is going on for sentient beings or Buddhas or different, and it's different contexts of experience. So that's conventional. But it's like there's simultaneously two things that are true about one thing almost.
Simultaneous two realities, right? So that's exactly why the Prasangika says for conventional truths, from the point of view of worldly conventions, we talk about false, true or false, because all conventional truths appear in a false way to the mind of sentient beings, right? But then from the point of view of worldly conventions, there's a distinction between seeing the color and the shape of the screen, which is correct, and seeing the screen appear, the color and the shape appearing as inherent, which is mistaken, right? So then from a worldly convention, you make a distinction between those two aspects of the conventional truths. There are conventional aspects that are false, and there are conventional aspects that are true from the worldly perspective.
Like false, like fictional.
Yeah, false, like if seeing, if you pull your eyeball and you see two screens instead of one, then that is not a correct form of consciousness, right?
Because there's an aspect of like someone having a conceptual idea or a meaning generality that is mistaken. There's still an aspect to that exists, like even the fictional thing or the mistaken idea. Anyway.
The meaning generality, we know it appears as the object, right? And that's not the case. But also if you pull your eyeball and you see two screens instead of one, then there's also a mistaken aspect, right? Okay. And that's very easy to recognize, that mistaken aspect is false. So then we say, okay, that's a false conventional truth, and seeing one screen is a true conventional truth from the point of view of worldly conventions.
So my actual question was an inherently Zola question. Because I was wondering, when you're talking about like the topics of today's class, because one thing that I was thinking through is like, okay, so you're trying to think about what we superimpose on top of what is actually there. And I was thinking, I was like, but what about this aspect of like attributing significance to, so it's like, okay, so maybe, everything, all these aggregates, all these things are combining, like they're not actually me. It's a combination of things that are not me that make what I am supposed to be, like inherently me. And it's that, and all these things about identity view, and I can't remember now, like mixing things together. It's like seeing that when you look at the continuity or the thing you're imposing upon, maybe this, I'm not managing to form this into a question, but it's like attributing significance to what you impose upon the mere self, like being like, okay, well maybe even if it isn't superimposition or it is something that I'm imputing, it's still significant, like just because it's imputed, like why does that make it less
we impute things that are existing phenomena, right? We can say, okay, this is a table, or that's a microphone, right? So that's correct form of imputing, and that imputation that exists. But if you impute an aspect that does not exist, like an inherent self, or a kind of a projection, or you think there's an inherent self there, and you label that, or you impute an inherent self exists, then of course that's not the correct form of imputation, right? But we have correct forms of imputation saying there's a mere self, a mere I, based on the mere collection of the aggregates. So that's a correct form of imputation, right? So there are also two types of imputation.
Okay, thank you. Yeah.
Okay, online, Laura, you got a question?
Yes. Thank you for the introduction. Thank you, welcome, Joe. So my question is about the object of negation. We need to have a clear object of negation. We always think about, if you like, dramatic events where there's a strong sense of I that arises. And I'm wondering, is this in order for us to negate the self-sufficient substantial existence self? Because if we're looking at the inherent self, then I'm perceiving this to be inherent. I'm perceiving now to be inherently here. You to be inherently that. My screen to be inherently this. So in fact, this could be an object of observation, like an object of observation that we use during the meditations. But no, we want something strong that has a big impact. Is that because we're negating self-sufficiency and contradicting self with it?
Probably because to recognize the object of refutation we call an inherent I is not easy, right? So in our meditations initially, probably what we recognize is a self-sufficient, substantial existing self, right? Most likely, I mean, if you look at this holiness example, that's the first one he realized, right? The selflessness of that particular self-sufficient, substantial existing self. So that's most likely the case. If we start with our meditations on emptiness, then to get a clear picture of how the I appears, it's not easy, right? So initially, probably it's this self-sufficient, substantial existing self that you pinpoint as the object of refutation, and then you refute that, and you realize the emptiness of that. And then you check, and then you say, okay, yeah, but there's a subtler one. And then you slowly start to understand how this self-sufficient, substantial existing self appear in those kind of occasions when there are emotions or fear or things like that, right? And then you probably engage in that kind of recognition of object refutation and refute that. And then you realize but this is not very clear in the scriptures, right? We only talk about the most subtle one is the emptiness of inherent existence, and the most subtle object refutation is this one, the inherent I. But how it works from the point of view experience, what you realize first and after, there's probably different possibilities, It depends on previous dispositions and why is holiness told that story. Maybe there's more to say to it than just his personal experience, right? There's a reason that this holiness talks about that. So then you think about those and you think most likely that's the first one we realize, right? Yeah. Okay. And recognize as object of refutation, right? Most likely.
Thank you. Yeah. But the very quick one. So the first one is because we study tenets and we're thinking, we look at the different schools with the aim ultimately to understand Sangika in the best possible way. That's what the schools. Should we also try to do meditation on emptiness using emptiness as understood in the other schools, or should we only think Prasangika when we meditate on emptiness?
Try the other schools as well, like in the mind-only school, no external existence, for example. That's why I said to really understand their view, you have to study it, contemplate, and meditate on it, right? So it's the same thing. And then you get a little bit idea of that school, and then you look in the autonomy school, and then you look into the Prasangika school, then it's easier to make distinctions. Not only in study ways, but also in your contemplations, right?
Okay, thank you. Yeah. And so the final one, very last one, it's experiential. So when I try meditation on emptiness, and I say it's not with the aggregates.
It's not aggregates, yeah.
It's not with the aggregates. It's different from the aggregates. But then it's not there. It might the question is, where is it?
Yeah.
So in a sense, I think that suggests to me that I haven't quite understood yet that it can either be with or without. How do I really get to grips with this is the only two options? There is no other. Because in my the next question, where is it?
Yeah, where is it then? It's not there. That's the structure, right? You first recognize object refutation, then you recognize or you realize the pervasion. It's either one or different. There's no third possibility. Yeah, so that's the first inference you generate. Yeah. So that you have to spend some time on it first. The main time is, of course, recognize object refutation, and then realize the pervasion. There's only two possibilities: one with or different from. There's no third one. You really have to get your mind around that, because if that's realized, then in the back of your mind, there's only the two possibilities. If it's not this, it's not that, it's not there. Mm-hmm. Yeah, because that power has to come, right? That, okay, it's not one, maybe different. It's not different, it's not there. Because it's not there comes from this second contemplation of, after the object refutation, the pervasion. It's either one or different. No third possibility. So that you also in meditation have to be convinced about that point, right?
Okay.
Yeah.
So they're telling themselves there's only two options, there's no other
Yeah,
option.
but not just telling yourself. Sit down and think, is there something else or not? And then come to the conclusion, there is no other option. Right?
Yeah. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Yeah. Yeah?
Just quickly, I have a question.
Yeah.
When we say the mere self is an impermanent phenomenon, are we meaning the mere self which is based on the body that's a collection of parts and the mind which is a collection of parts?
The mere person, right?
And on that you're saying mere person is the collection that's momentary changing, and the I is just the mere.
It's a non-associated compositional factor, right? Yeah.
Okay, one more?
Thanks for the talk. I'm not familiar with the terminology so much, and I wish I was. I think I have like a very vague idea of what they are, and I really enjoy this kind of using these terminologies to try to explore the nature of the mind and really go into depths and think of like how do we perceive the observer-observer effect and the nature of idea versus reality, like the nature of how we compose ideas and think about how we think about concepts as opposed to those concepts being existent in the world. And I like to think of, like, for example, in my room, if someone refurbished my room and it was painted blue, for example, my idea of my room now would be false because if someone
changed.
Just it's like it's something that I've always thought about, like our ideas, like whatever neural network is creating our ideas, they have the way they map onto reality is purely like a utility, and I think that utility has helped us, but really beyond even what, like if we were being really creative, maybe we could say all of London outside of this building at Elephant and Castle could have been very quietly painted blue, but our idea of this room, we all think that the Elephant Castle tube station, the city, etc., is all as it is, but it could be very false. And I think in this sense, like I just feel the terminologies, because I'm confused by them, but I find them very interesting ways to explore that difference between the concepts of reality and actually what is reality. And
is,
I wonder if that's kind of I suppose my question is the two truths, because the conventional truth is something I can't quite get my head around, in the sense that maybe it's a utilitarian way of agreement. We all agree that that's a chair, that's a cushion, whatever it happens to be. And then the other truth is that thing which is supposed to be or professed to be beyond any conventional truth. And I think that's why I really would like to try to understand the difference between the two. And that lady helped inspire me, I suppose, to ask the question. And I just wonder, like, all things being relative, and if there was like some kind of way to understand that distinction, and like if there's any change or if they can be dissolved, if there's no distance between the two.
Yeah, so everything, what we said before, the conventional realities, they appear to us in a very subjective way, right? So what appears to you is different from what appears to the person sitting next to you. Yeah, so that's kind of true with conventional realities. Yeah, but ultimate reality, when you realize that, then it appears the same to all, right? So that's why we call it ultimate reality. Yeah, that everything is empty of inherent existence. But the conventional realities, the table, the building, it has kind of conventional aspects and it has aspects of subjectivity. Yeah, how things appear to your mind is different from others, So that's what we talk about here as well, that things appear to us in a particular way, which is an approximation of reality, but it's not really reality, right? Yeah, think about it maybe. Everything, yeah. 1 week contemplation, and then next week.
But could I ask you about it? I don't know, like if there's time because of it. Okay.
Maybe next week.
Sure.
Yeah, because it's time. Yeah, we have to. We promised.
Yeah.
Yeah. So let's then dedicate. Yeah, the contemplations and particular of no self. Yeah, because that's the root of samsara we can eliminate with the no self doctrine. So discussing that is great merit, and also dedicate that merit in a similar way, that all beings have this wisdom, realizing emptiness directly as soon as possible in order to stop this cycle of rebirth, and then motivated the bodhicitta, of course, and then for the long and healthy life of precious gurus, particularly so as Dalai Lama, and swift return to Lama Zopa Rinpoche, and Rinpoche be of the greatest benefit for all sentient beings, right? And for the Dharma and sentient beings, so dedicate in those ways. And thank you, the dedicator, and the aim we dedicate students to, and dedication empty of inherent existence, right? So dedicate, Dagi.
Dagi jine sape gewa di tanan drowa kena gampenda Geba jesun lusan drapai tempe nimpo rindu sajesho Karera we korwe jinkamso penan dewa malu jumene Chere zingwan tenzing gyasui shape site badu tengyuchi. Homage to Manjushri, the youthful, in this way to the awakened one, the transcendent Lord, the wisdom kaya, spontaneously arisen. Single eye of wisdom entirely unobscured, the light of wisdom forever shining brightly. To you, Arapasana, I pay homage. To you, the very embodiment of wisdom, I bow. Thus is it explained by all the perfect Buddhas. This concludes his teaching spoken by the transcendent Lord Shakyamuni, the essence of the perfect recitation of the names of the wisdom being, the transcendent Lord Manjushri. Tu tenji danjam gyun gewe tenchu gyo bella kachira zupa Sunden yu mizin pachu ki je dadre tempe peldu nyu junshu Chanchu Sanchu Rinpoche Magye Panange Gyuchi Gepa Nyampa Mebaya Gone Konde Bewasho Toni Tawa Rinpoche Magye Panange Gyuchi Gepa Nyampa Mebaya Gone Konde Bewasho. And as long as space remains, as long as migrators remain, until then may I too remain to dispel the suffering of migrators. May the King of Dharmas and Kappa's way of Dharma practice flourish. May the omens of obstacles be pacified and all conducive circumstances be complete. Through the power of having made single-pointed requests to you, Lus and Drogba, may all unfortunate manifestations of a degenerated age, illness, famine, quarrelling, epidemic disease, Gara spirits, interferers, and so forth be pacified, and may excellent collections of conducive conditions increase. Please bless me that my wishes be swiftly fulfilled. By invoking the power of loving kindness and compassion of Chenrezig, and through the force of making extensive prayers, may all sickness, war, fighting, and famine be completely pacified, so that beings have long, healthy, and happy lives. May the glorious Guru's lives be long and stable, and may all beings equally in the extent of space have happiness. May I and others, without exception, accumulate merit and purify negativities, and may we be blessed to quickly attain Buddhahood. Kyawa kundi yada lama dan jame chuki pala lo chuchi sadan langi yunten rapsune doje changi kupanyu tu sho.
Okay, thank you so much. Good evening, good night. See you soon.